that SpongeBob movie where you had SpongeBob and Patrick getting drunk off ice cream, fighting for their lives, and near the end where SpongeBob becomes a guitar wizard and blasts the helmets off to save the day? What if it was a video game? That's how you get SpongeBob Squarepants the movie, created by Heavy Iron Studios. SpongeBob Squarepants the movie, the game, portrays itself as a collectathon where in this case the collecting will consist of Goofy Goober tokens. As the player, you follow SpongeBob and Patrick adventure throughout the endless ocean all the way to South City and back. The game of course follows the plot of the movie, throwing in some different takes or some extra added scenery that differs from the movie. The game studio Heavy Iron Studios, who many know as the studio that made SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, had made this game similar in mechanics somewhat to Battle for Bikini Bottom, but changed or adjusted much of the aspects, even making the game more linear compared to its predecessor. Of course, the focus of the video will be on this game, not comparing this with the other SpongeBob games. Without further ado, and as the chapter title states, it all started with the idea of a missing square of cheese. The story follows the plot of the 2004 movie, starting off with everyone freaking out of an accident occurring inside the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob the manager arrives at the scene in a cool red street car. Once he has enough of Mr. Krab's distress, he fights some natural predators, goes to the Krusty Krab and fixes the Krabby Patty. Unfortunately, all of that was a lie and he has to wake back up to reality. SpongeBob then goes back to work expecting his well-deserved promotion for everything he has sacrificed and more for the Krusty Krab. And how does he get treated back? He loses the promotion to a guy who doesn't even want to work there, or try to work even. Disappointed and feeling like his whole life was wasted, he goes and gets drunk off ice cream. Meanwhile, Plankton watches his competitor build another restaurant right next to the first one. Getting frustrated by his lack of success, he gets into a fit of rage. His computer wife Karen intervenes, leading him to express more of his frustration of all his plans failing. After hearing Plankton talk of going through all his plans from A to Y, Karen questioned what about Z? Plankton, the genius who doesn't even know the alphabet completely, then looks at his Z folder and finds the perfect plan to overcome his past failures and succeed. Plankton proceeds with the plan by first stealing King Neptune's crown, while he is busy talking to Princess Mindy. Then frames Mr. Krabs for the criminal act against the king and makes it almost impossible to retrieve it by selling it to a vendor in South City. SpongeBob arrives at the scene in a drunken state to expose Mr. Krabs for the jerk he is, before realizing Krabs' life is in real danger. After a crazy exchange happens between Mindy, SpongeBob, Patrick, and King Neptune, Mr. Krabs is given 6 days before his execution to give enough time for SpongeBob and Patrick to retrieve Neptune's crown. They use the infamous Paddy Wagon to go through Bikini Bottom as the city begins its descent into a dystopia. On their way, they lose the Paddy Wagon to a thug and continuously get laughed at by a pair of hillbillies. They also discover Plankton has installed radio towers across the desert for inconspicuous reasoning and have to destroy them from spreading evil messages. By evil, most likely are just radio messages saying, "Come to the chum bucket and you won't succeed, SpongeBob and Patrick," with some laughter in between. Of course, the two knuckleheads do destroy the towers and end the not really innocent lives of the hillbillies. Afterwards, they find a bar called Fug Tug, where the stolen Paddy Wagon is. Patrick and SpongeBob hunt down the car key, aka Golden Spatula, with much difficulty where Patrick is fighting for so many thugs and SpongeBob is getting flung around left and right. Once they get the key and drive out of there, their temptation of ice cream gets to them, leading to the duo falling into a horrible trap. Patrick didn't think twice of it seeing skulls and bones and instead followed, "Let me change my ice cream flavor to chocolate." SpongeBob holds onto the monster's head while Patrick fights it off. They try to escape, but in the process lose the Paddy Wagon. As they cry in their despair, Mindy comes along and uses her magic to make them into real men. With their newfound confidence, SpongeBob and Patrick face all the monsters in the trench and comes out unscathed. Even end up destroying some giant television showing advertisements for Plankton, until Dennis arrives. Dennis forcibly removes their manhood and assaults the duo. Somehow they survive the battle, but Dennis pulls out his trump card, which ends up being his spiky boots. As he laughs, knowing he will kill them with his first stomp, a colossal boot stomps Dennis himself, saving the heroes with a Deus Ex Machina. Of course, this is short-lived as Bigger Boot ends up being the Cyclops and captures the Sea Dwellers back to Cell City. SpongeBob and Patrick dream that they're in a Goofy Goober racing course of sorts, before waking up in Cell City with dried up fists everywhere. Up until this point, throughout their journey to Cell City, they encounter bugs, monsters, rural citizens, the club life, volcano sauce, and an ice cream kidnapper. And then worst of all, Dennis. Both SpongeBob and Patrick survive Dennis, but could not handle the Cyclops, as their fate is determined by the ornaments with googly eyes glued to them. Since they are the main characters, they miraculously use the power of friendship to send a big enough teardrop to the power and free them from the heat. After miraculously escaping the Cyclops' wrath by riding the crown out of Cell City, they soon find a miracle in the form of David Hasselhoff, who gives them a ride on his back while he turbo swims back to Bikini Bottom. Of course, Dennis comes back to take his revenge this time, facing SpongeBob. However, it gets outplayed and is never seen again. To extend the game a bit, instead of using Hasselhoff's chest as a cannon like in the movie version, they instead go through Plankton's dystopia, fighting off an abundance of strong foes and solving some tricky puzzles to try and stop Plankton from winning. Though they did fail to stop him from living towards the Krusty Krab, Minnie brings back the fallen paddy wagon for the duo to drive through the depressing city and arrive just in the nick of time to save Mr. Krabs, return Neptune's crown, and beat Plankton. Had it not been taken into account that even if they succeed, they would still have to face a mind-controlled King Neptune, SpongeBob still ends up victorious against Plankton, returns the crown to its proper owner, unfreezes Mr. Krabs, and both him and Patrick are celebrated as heroes for saving the city, compared to the movie where only SpongeBob is congratulated. Of course, to make it more wholesome, SpongeBob finally gets promoted to manager and lives happily ever after. SpongeBob and Patrick unlock new moves they can use as you progress throughout the game, with some levels Goofy Goober tokens being inaccessible as a result of not having the required move unlocked. There are also upgrades for each move that enhances their effectiveness. In terms of unlocking said moves, it can only be done at a C-Cell telephoning Mindy, where only the introduction of that ability in that specific level can be unlocked. Not that it matters, since you can't progress past the game without unlocking level-specific power-ups in the first place. Each upgrade to an ability or in getting more health requires manliness points, where reaching a threshold allows for an upgrade point. These can stack if going over multiple thresholds without using any upgrade points. Additionally, you need a certain amount of tokens to unlock an ability going up more as you progress. SpongeBob moveset consists of the Karate Spin, Bass, Sponge Bowl, and Sonic Wave. His Karate Spin hits enemies if they're close enough to SpongeBob or are in his radius of attack. The attack also allows him to use it while in the air, allowing for more jump time and being able to hit buttons or enemies in the air if needed. Bass allows SpongeBob to uppercut in the air, hitting flying enemies or buttons that can't normally be hit by Karate Spin. Sponge Bowl move is where SpongeBob throws a bowling ball with pins so in the direction it will be going and hurls into enemies. Sonic Wave is SpongeBob playing the guitar and directing the cord through the air for 6 seconds in any direction to hit enemies, and can be stopped earlier for an area of effect hit instead of direct, as it does the same damage. For his upgraded moveset, SpongeBob Karate Spin deflects objects back at the enemy that set the attack, such as flingers. Bass becomes a ticking time bomb stuck to whatever SpongeBob hit, whether enemy or object, which can be manually detonated or detonated automatically after a few seconds. SpongeBob becomes a spiky electric ball of doom with an area of effect that can hit multiple enemies, and Sonic Wave can lock onto enemies, guaranteeing a hit. SpongeBob, I would say, has a good moveset overall in terms of power and defense. He can get more jump time in the air using the Karate Spin, and can hit airborne targets with either his Bass or Sonic Wave attack. SpongeBob can also hit big groups of enemies at once with his upgraded Sponge Bowl, which helps in groups of enemies not too far away. He has 2 additional abilities wherein his tongue acts as a board for going down unique terrain, and in his second one uses his sponge body to wall jump side to side to get to places unreachable otherwise. For Patrick, his moveset consists of the Star Spin, Cartwheel, Smash, Throw Move, and Swing. Star Spin is like the Karate Spin for SpongeBob, except he cannot jump while performing the action. Cartwheel is just Patrick cartwheeling through his enemies until they are taken out. Smash is Patrick slamming down on the ground with his butt crushing enemies below. His Throw Move is just throwing objects or stun enemies around, whether at buttons or at other enemies. For his upgraded moveset, Patrick's Star Spin can now deflect enemy projectiles back at them. Cartwheel has an area of effect added to it, easily hitting enemies around more in his radius. Smash has area of effect added as well, with enemies not getting directly hit becoming stunned instead. Also, he either has a very flexible neck or it's been completely broken. Front move can now aim at enemies and has more power put into it to take out enemies faster. Patrick has a different fighting style compared to SpongeBob, where he has more ground focused moves, limiting his air attack to only throwing, which on its own can be a problem if there are no stunned enemies or objects around the throw. On the other hand, he is very good at handling enemies on the ground, being able to damage and stun spinners and defeat foggers with ease. Patrick does have an additional non-combat ability called Swing, which is him using his super long tongue to swing off of floating ice cubes to traverse levels or get Goofy Goober tokens. Of course, while not a move per se, but still an important upgrade is the Krabby Patty health bar, which in this case you have to upgrade 2 health bars since the game separates SpongeBob and Patrick health, rather than them both sharing one. No doubt, with these moves in the movie, with much of the trouble they dealt with in the movie being non-threatening, such as the thugs in the bar or Dennis. However, it's because they are non-violent sea creatures that outplaying violent foes becomes more entertaining in the end than just endlessly crushing mountains of opponents just for some retail coins. No doubt though, it requires all their abilities to travel back and forth between multiple levels to get enough Goofy Goober tokens, and if wanted, fully 100% the game. There are about 3 different types of levels in this game: platforming, boss fights, and driving or sliding. Usually the format goes in the order of platforming to driving or sliding back to platforming with boss fights somewhere in the mix. Most of the platforming levels do require abilities that are not acquired until late into the game, which means to 100%ing a level early on may not be possible most of the time, unless abusing some in-game mechanics. Also, I will be referring to tasks as challenges since I think it fits the description a bit better, but that's just a personal opinion. They are still called tasks in the game. The first level acts as a tutorial in teaching you how to double jump, break boxes to get some dumbbells, hit buttons, and use obscure abilities such as wall jumping and tongue riding to get used to the controls, in addition to getting used to the movement of SpongeBob the character itself. Afterwards, it throws you into another platforming level, this time taking place in Goofy Goober establishment itself, with Patrick taking over as a playable character. This is where the game introduces learning new abilities required to progress, in which a certain amount of Goofy Goober tokens are required. As a result, a second Goofy Goober token can be acquired in 2 ways as presented in the intersection of pathways the clam cell was located at. One can be earned through Mortal Kombat using SpongeBob, and the other can be unlocked by just hitting a bunch of walls in a path and then jumping on some trampolines. Of course, the more fun but longer challenge will be battling out waves of enemies spawning on a floating patch of land, rather than breaking through a bunch of walls. Either way, Patrick can then earn his new ability and begin cartwheeling forever. First driving level comes around and is easy to beat since it acts as the ground on getting used to the feel of the paddy wagon, the use of turbos, and obstacles that may or may not be easy to dodge. Of course, there are Krabby Patties laying around in case too much damage is taken to prevent the car from breaking down. While the game continues on, each driving level does have more than 1 token that can be obtained. However, it is always the same 3 challenges. The second token requires beating the level under a set time. The third token is a hoop challenge where the vehicle has to go through some yellow circles or else the level ends early, with the circles becoming red and fading away once the time to go through them is almost up. The last token is another variant of beating the level under a set time, however it is much more strict on how many mistakes can be made before the challenge is considered to be over. Driving levels can be fun if thought of as a speedrun, and how tight you can make turns and properly make use of turbos to get to the end as fast as possible. An exception to at least the first token would be in Sunday Driving, where the main objective will be to follow a Goofy Goober looking fellow around the track and not to get too far away from him, as that will end the level as a loss and have to restart the chase all over again. It is also seemingly impossible to get in front of Goofy Goober, as he is programmed to always be ahead of the wagon no matter what. There are also sliding levels where instead of a Krabby Patty vehicle, it ranges from a bathtub to a clam cell to even the Royal Crown, and there is no turbos or acceleration with the buttons, but instead heavily relies on momentum carried throughout the track. Braking does involve pulling back on the joystick. Jumping may lose significant momentum depending how deep of a jump has to be made. The sliding levels do have the same token challenge with the driving ones with the rings and 2-time challenges. There are harder sliding levels than others of course, but personal one being Rock Slide Macho Challenge being one of the trickiest ones to beat. Maybe requires some speedrunning tactics or else very tight turning and precision to even have a chance of getting the token. I had to go onto a cliff and hopefully land on the track below while I slowly descended off of it. Even jump onto a yellow purple monster to get the extra little bit of save time at the very beginning of the level. All levels do have a gimmick they stick to, whether that involves buttons or wood that can only be hit by an uppercut from a SpongeBob in order to traverse the desert. Buttons that can only be hit by slamming onto it. Buttons that need to be pressed down continuously by objects or fruits. buttons that too far and high to be reached needs to be hit by an object or a fruit. Even buttons that can only be hit by a music wave. Yeah, buttons kind of force these mechanics to be utilized, but once again, the levels do utilize these mechanics with enemies as well. In order to defeat spinners introduced in the bar level, you learn the only move that can hit them at the time being Patrick's smash attack. You can't hit them when they're not in the motion of attack, but usually they're already spinning by that point, so it's better to go with the smash attack. Which, this also helps break through some of the cracked floor to reach hidden challenges such as the Disco Star. I have to say the Disco Star is a fun challenge where folks watch the dancing floor as Patrick progresses to the end trying to avoid the red spots. He even might be in the mood to dance himself. Moving back to enemies, Mervs initially when introduced can only be hit by throwable objects in the same level where Patrick learns the ability to throw. This approach with them can lead to death by laser. Mervs later on when facing Spongebob and Welcome to Planktopolis Minions level also have the ability to shoot out rocket-like missiles that spread out, which means they become hittable with an upgraded karate spin. Bulma can still use the Sonic Wave to hit Mervs, also if the missiles don't interrupt his killer chord. Some of the levels carry out self-contained themes that end up getting resolved in the end. In 3000 Miles of Cell City, Al and the Desert of the Hillbillies constantly laughing at SpongeBob, or even Patrick if they switch in the portal head, up until their demise indirectly by the hands of SpongeBob. In Bubble Blowing Baby Hunt, it's a supposed bar with a bunch of thugs and criminals. As seen in the movie, they end up having a huge fight in the end determining who was the bubble blower. At the end of this level, there ends up being a huge fight not with spawners constantly summoning new enemies, but with just a group of spinners, foggers, and slammers who just breaking through the windows of the establishment ready to fight. As there are monsters the duo encounter during the movie without any violence, in the game, violence is indeed used. And now that we're at man level, SpongeBob rides a lava-aquatic monster by using force with the sponge ball, attacks a lobster monster to make it move away from the cave exit. Again rides this yellow-purple monster using force, and pokes multiple eyeballs of an innocent looking monster that just wanted to say hi. Even politics makes it into the game in Cell City Dead Ahead, where the landfill has giant TVs trying to manipulate those that lie even around there into Plankton's evil scheme. Also there'll be some nasty stuff on this level. In Google Eyes and Smelly Knickknacks level, the Cyclops is chasing them around as they try to escape with Neptune's crown. As they ride on it across a bunch of poses, some more dangerous than others with electricity poking out, the Cyclops attempts to scare them with menacing poses as they pass by, or tries to grab them unsuccessfully. In the level Welcome to Planktopolis Minions, SpongeBob and Patrick are back in Bikini Bottom, and it makes sense that their journey will be in taking down Plankton's newfound Bucket Empire. This to me is a 3-part arc where they begin their quest at the supposed start of Bikini Bottom, fighting for the most powerful enemies the game has to offer, solving the hardest of riddles and puzzles, doing insane wall jumps across tall spikes on the floor, and facing giant-sized robotic statues of Plankton all the way until the end. Sometimes you don't get much of a break at the end, facing enemies of sorts on falling platforms while still having to run around and defend yourself. At the end of the level, Plankton heads to the Krusty Krab, leaving SpongeBob and Patrick needing a way to reach the restaurant in time. Conveniently, Mindy magically brings back the paddy wagon, leading into the level drive of the Knucklehead mixed Spazitron. Driving through falling debris, barrels of explosives everywhere, tar roads to impede the vehicle, and Plankton's own measures of dropping statues onto the paddy wagon or even blocking the path back if too slow. This level also is reminiscent of the first driving level, where now you start at the bridge going back all the way to the Krusty Krab as a destination point. Once having crashed into the building, the climax ensues with King Neptune being the final boss and ultimately ending Plankton's whole charade. Throughout most of the platforming levels, there are portals which take either SpongeBob or Patrick into a token challenge, whether it involves combat, jumping on floating boxes, or even rolling towards the token. These are pretty fun to do as it gives a break from the main level into a fun or difficult challenge to beat. These challenges get progressively harder as the game progresses, with one exception involving Patrick. The combat challenge mentioned from earlier is just the same each time except in terms of enemies faced. Other than the first one and the last one, they involve future enemies not yet encountered, which could be challenging when getting used to their abilities and even their durability of how many hits they can take. SpongeBob plays all except one of these combat challenges, where his moveset is utilized against multiple different foes, or just spam upgraded karate spin and always win no matter what opponent it is. Patrick's challenge is the hardest of them all, where he has to face a fearsome jellyfish with no idea what it can do. Another challenge involves SpongeBob becoming a ball, therefore the name is called SpongeBob Challenge. As a ball, all it has to be done is to reach the end and touch the token, where steam, windmills, and moving boxes can cause SpongeBob to fall into the abyss. Even the pathway can have a section where it twirls around with some holes along it requiring patience to go through it. Some of the mechanics involve taking risks with small windows of steam not being blown out, rolling onto the steam itself to reach the next area, memorizing the color pattern of rotating panels to get across, and avoiding the windmills with little to no escape from a mistake. These challenges take some time in learning when to roll or not roll, and thinking when is it the best time to go through a hazardous area. There are also challenges involving Patrick to jump across different types of blocks to reach a token. These blocks can be simple, from just moving left to right or up and down, to spinning continuously left at different speeds, spinning vertically or horizontally, with some sides even having spikes on them. Other blocks include ice ones, shrinking blocks, and trampolines along the way. What makes this particular set of challenges hard is Patrick has to reach the token under a time limit, and dying one too many times being certain death where all blocks and platforms disappear and Patrick falls to the abyss. Of course, this can be pretty fun in terms of picking multiple paths or just seeing if you can make it all the way without falling. Additional challenges include the bungee challenge and sonic wave guitar challenge. The bungee challenge is where Spongebob gets an insane wedgie from the fishing rod, going up and down vertically in an attempt to go through all rings and collect the Goofy Goober token. Of course, there are obstacles such as steam and electricity that will get in the way of the yellow rings, where positioning and timing when to fully drop down is necessary at times. Sometimes it's a bit annoying when Spongebob is falling a little too close to the bottom and takes damage without pressing the button to drop. The sonic wave guitar challenge, on the other hand, is mainly difficult for not knowing the full path that the yellow rings follow. The first one is simple enough to get either in the first try or two, and the rest take a bit more patience in memorizing and to remember the full path to the target. Going through the whole level backwards can be a bit daunting, especially when going through dark tubes that may end the song run early due to little to no light. However, this challenge does a good job of showcasing the level scenery run throughout different angles to appreciate the artistic choices more. Such as in the level I'm Ready to Present, where the roof of the chocolate floor room has popsicles pointing in different directions, or the smoky atmosphere above the lava room and bubble blowing baby hunt. I will say the worst challenge among them all for me is the last guitar challenge located in Cell City dead ahead. The rings do not at all give a clear intention of where the next one will be. In fact, it may often lead to death ruining runs. This made the challenge frustrating in terms of just trying over and over until memorizing all the rings' location and how to position properly to not miss or hit some random debris. Sometimes even the tube doors closed all of a sudden with no explanation other than maybe you were moving too slow or were not high enough to avoid the initial hit. Who knows in the end. For the most part, the game is not too difficult to beat, with the exception of some challenges that may take some time, such as the last guitar challenge. Of course, there are boss fights throughout the game either Spongebob or Patrick will have to confront as well. This game only has 4 boss fights, first one being the infamous ice cream monster kidnapper. In other words, Frogfish. This boss is pretty easy as you begin getting acquainted with dodging and deflecting back projectiles to the boss. To first start damaging the boss, Patrick has to hit the monster on the back while the struggle is to maintain balance at the edge of the arena. This is done a couple of times before the monster begins distancing itself from Patrick and attempts to use its tongue to hit Patrick with the ice cream cone. The monster can also shoot out blue goo towards Patrick, making it more difficult to maneuver against the tongue. Early on, the tongue goes for straight hits which take long enough to hit back at it. However, later on begins to spin around with the cone similar to that of a spinner, requiring Patrick to utilize a smash attack, which may be more difficult to land at times. If Patrick has the upgraded start spin attack, he can also deflect back the goo to the monster. Not a bad introduction boss fight, I would say, since the utilization of the tongue gives it more depth. Second and third boss fights go to Dennis himself. Dennis' first bout with the duel begins with him using Spongebob as a golf club and hitting toilets towards Patrick. Patrick can either hit the toilets back at him or throw a watermelon to inflict damage. If the toilets do land on the ground, it inflicts an area of effect attack that spreads out like a circle. As the fight progresses, with Dennis already having taken quite a bit of damage, spinners will begin to spawn on Patrick's platform, making it more difficult to deal with multiple attacks at once. With the upgraded slam attack to stun enemies, Patrick can even throw back spinners at Dennis if need be. Dennis can even get frustrated at times, slamming Spongebob to the ground excessively. After Dennis' defeat, he tries to close in on Patrick, laughing uncontrollably as he gets crushed by a bigger boo. On the third boss fight, or round 2 for Dennis, this time Spongebob faces off against him on the back of Hasselhoff. Spongebob can't throw sponge bowls at Dennis or deflect back knives he throws out to inflict damage. Spongebob cannot get close to Dennis, where he would just jump to another arm or leg to keep distance away from close attacks. Once again, enemies will spawn after enough damage has been done to Dennis, this time being slammers to get in the way of striking at Dennis. Once Dennis has been defeated for a second time, he finally closes in on Spongebob, ready to crush him with his boot. Patrick, unable to do anything, begins to scream in agony as Dennis smiles confidently, knowing he can't be stopped this time, only to be hit by the catamaran, ending his fist life. The final boss of the game is of course King Neptune himself and his almighty trident. His initial attacks involve using the trident as a flamethrower targeting SpongeBob. This forces SpongeBob to either take damage or jump in the opposite direction, as the fire will be his running speed. His second attack involves making an electric field where electric lines are going around in a circle, and electric circles emit from within the center of the field, spreading outwards and expanding to the border of the field. This makes it hard to jump around inside and avoid getting hit if you're only paying attention to one of the electric patterns and not the other. Thankfully, the field is not too big and can be escaped easily. However, this leads to another tricky part of the boss fight. Throughout these attacks, SpongeBob has to make attempts at hitting the tables inside the Krusty Krab. This will be useful against King Neptune's ultimate laser beam attack, which can be redirected against the king himself once all the tables have been turned. Not only does SpongeBob have to hit the tables, but also does Neptune's attack at the same time. While it's not too bad at taking a hit or two, it does reset the attack counter, meaning it may take longer to defeat the boss. For the flamethrower, it needs to be used 3 times, and for the electricity, it needs to be used 2 times before the laser beam attack is used. There are Krabby Patties around to replenish health of course, so no need for panicking if too much damage is taken. Once the tables have turned, SpongeBob has to get behind the frozen Mr. Krabs and wait for Neptune to hit himself off of some crazy reflexes. Then, the only attack that will work once he is stunned is the Sonic Wave Guitar attack. Unfortunately, no other attack will do any harm against Neptune in this state, else he wakes up all of a sudden and is ready to fight again. Speaking of which, without Neptune getting stunned, no attack will do harm to him. Either he will block it with the spin of his trident, or will push back SpongeBob and then proceed with an attack with enough distance between the two. The SpongeBob straight up misses, so that leaves a Sonic Wave left to use. After several successful hits back with the Light Blast, Neptune destroys most of the floor and Flingers spawn in. The boss only uses electricity during the attack phase other than the laser beam, which only uses the emitting circle attack pattern. My guess it would be too hard to jump around with too many things to look at while still not falling into the bubble below. Flingers can be a bit annoying, such as when trying to hit King Neptune when he is stunned, as they will try to attack SpongeBob still, which may cause an interruption to the Sonic Wave attack or possibly make SpongeBob fall and die. Thankfully, it only resets back to the broken floor phase of the fight and not restarting the whole fight again. Once SpongeBob defeats him, we finally get to see the baldness of the Majesty, also freeing him from Plankton's control and ending the game. The game does have some extra collectibles such as treasure chests that unlock a variety of content, such as the different skins for Patrick and SpongeBob, trailers for the movie, gimmicks such as making the antenna longer on the buckets, or making the fogger enemy teensy weeny tiny people, or even making the hand that grabs the falling duo into a hook instead, and concept artwork that gives ideas on how the game was made or even the movie. Sometimes the treasure chests are very easy to get once they come into view, other times they are a bit too much of a hassle to figure out how to get. Most of the time treasure chests can be found in shortcuts or alternative paths, such as in driving levels where one such treasure chest is in the grass area off of the sidewalk path, or is located in a sneaky back way off the main road. Some are out in the open, or in the air near a ramp. They may require losing time to get to them, therefore it is heavily recommended to get the treasure chest in the first token, or maybe even the first time challenge token, since the ring challenge does not really allow leeway into reaching chests, and the matcha challenge has too harsh of a time range to be going for chests at times. There are chests also in the extra challenges for both SpongeBob and Patrick. They are sometimes a hassle to reach, but are very doable with the right mindset. Now, the worst offenders of offendable treasure chests would be the ones requiring to destroy an area of boxes all at once. There is no way of knowing this information beforehand without just happening to run to it by accident. This happens in 3,000 Miles of Cell City. There is a group of boxes where most of it has to be destroyed at once, or else the treasure chest won't spawn in. Now that where Man has explosive barrels making it much easier to get the treasure chest, other very hidden locations of the chest are in the final driving level where ramming into a line of plankton statues will open up a hidden path with the treasure chest inside. Also in the same level, driving backwards is a requirement for a treasure chest near the end of the level, and can be very hard to spot if not straight up miss that there is an open area there. Now, a treasure chest I like was the one in the bar level where Patrick has to defeat thugs on the floor if he happens to fall. This requires defeating several floors of enemies, usually spinners, to magically break open a giant barrel containing the treasure chest. Nonetheless, while still not very clear, this at least makes more sense in that defeating enemies that were extra would end up unlocking the treasure chest. Now, the unfortunate part of this is if Patrick enters a portal such as a combat or SpongeBob challenge, it will reset the giant barrel and respawn the 4 enemies that need to be defeated again. Now the real treasure unlocked from these chests go in order where no matter which chest is grabbed across the game, it will always be the same reward that corresponds to how many chests have been gotten so far. This means unfortunately the best costume in the game requires 41 treasure chests. That's basically all of them. Would I say it's worth collecting that many? I would say kinda. Some of the rewards shouldn't really be locked behind these chests, such as in-game movie-pasted cutscenes or even the movie trailers. I think artwork is a good reward, and of course the best rewards are the costumes and enemy changing effects. Who wouldn't want to shrink their enemy down a bit in size or make them super visible with a fountain of light on their heads? Of course it will be entertaining to see a nude Patrick also dancing it out in the club scene. Would it make more sense to have Disco Patrick's skin be on the disco floor instead? Yes, but that version of Patrick got better things to do, like eat some good old Krabby Patties. Even better yet, turning the paddy wagon horn sound effect into La Cucaracha sound is too good not to constantly horn throughout the road. For those curious, the artwork gives an idea what could have been implemented more into the game, but wasn't, such as different looking flingers based on the environment of the level, a possible Bikini Bottom level or a Goofy Goober level with enemies such as slammers, some kind of balloon enemies that shoot out projectiles, a candy themed popper with a mustache, and much different spinner designs. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if different texture and models for enemies were condensed or scrapped to just one skin, since it looks like there were a lot of ideas for different skins in multiple levels, but may have been left out due to time constraints during development. The possibility that even more costumes for SpongeBob and Patrick just seems more of a letdown if there wasn't a Viking SpongeBob skin or Caveman SpongeBob and Patrick just wandering around about modern Bikini Bottom. Also, can't forget about the extra voice lines that can be played anytime in the menu once unlocked.
Here comes the pain train! Come on, Patrick. It's so much nicer with a bucket helmet. You don't have to worry about hurting yourself thinking anymore.
Now, if you're a big fan of the Sponge costume, then I would say the treasure chests are worth it. However, if the game is basically 100% done, is there really any reason to come back? If that's the case, maybe the Sponge costume isn't worth it. But I would argue facing bosses in this form is kinda awesome. Maybe not worth replaying every SpongeBob level with it, but just the bosses alone. Even then, it's a stretch with that many treasure chests, so maybe not worth it in the end. The game is fun to play, however it may not be as fun in fully completing. Some of it has to do with how much driving and sliding levels there are relative to the rest of the game, as I don't find them as fun as the platforming levels. Some of it goes to the token requirements for reaching certain levels and being unable to unlock a needed ability. The last driving level in the game wants 50 tokens right after the level that already required 40 tokens. While 50 tokens is not all the tokens in the game, it definitely is a very large amount of them, as it comes out to about 74% of total token amount. However, if you don't include King Neptune or the aforementioned driving level where you do need those tokens, then it is 78%. Even with all that, there are still fun things such as the combat challenge, the Sponge Ball challenge, or just some gimmicks in the level environments like Patrick being in SpongeBob Manager's dream prior to the real announcement of the manager, or last platforming level with Plankton owning Bikini Bottom with self-defense statues of himself and even Sandy Cheeks running inside a wheel. The story is still good as it is following the movie plot and events, and the in-game cinematic scenes still do a good job both teaching you how these new enemies work and being funny. The music is another great part of the game that I believe is underrated and is much better than it probably should be. Here are some examples. If anything, I would always play the slide levels just for the music alone. I played this game when I was younger, and I still remember it being fun enough to beat the game multiple times. If anyone gets their hands on this game, I'd say give it a chance and play through some of it. Only warning is to make sure to get enough tokens since your backtracking doesn't happen as frequently as it will happen. I would like to give thanks to Well Walder for some script helping, which includes suggestions for each chapter, and for writing in the introduction with Remember That SpongeBob will be line. Without further ado, I leave y'all to it.